Okay, shall we start? Yes. Good evening. Online, good evening. Hope it is audible, visible. Now the first one is our weekly current affairs. Now which all topics were in news in this week? Now which all topics were in this week? Now this is about the master class with respect to the weekly current affairs. Now which all topics were in news in this week? Now is the first topic which was in news. The first topic which was in news, we call it as the topic on, we call it as which one? The G20. Now why this G20 was in news? Why this G20? The recent, the 20th edition or the 20th summit of G20 which took place at where? Which took place at, we call it as Johannesburg. Where is this Johannesburg? Johannesburg, it is in, we call it as South Africa. This was our first important question. This is highly and highly important for our exam point of view. First we will discuss this. Now while discussing about this topic, we will talk about what is G20, and second one we will talk about what is the declaration with respect to this 20th edition we will discuss, and we will also discuss about what was the outcome from India side also. We will see this part also. The first one. The second major important, the topic which was in news, we call it as, the major one we call it as IBCA was in news. What is this IBCA? Now International Big Cat Alliance was in news. Now this IBCA, the 2027 edition will take place at where? Will take place at India. This also we'll see. Now while talking about this IBCA, we'll also talk about what is IBCA. Now under this IBCA, which all animals are being, it is conserved or protected, and when it has been launched, we'll see all those things. And the third major important, the topic which was in news, we call it as the Lachit Borphukan. Now why this Lachit Borphukan was in news? Now recently, now Lachit Borphukan, the anniversary has been celebrated, and our Prime Minister has also wished the Assamese people about a day called as Lachit Borphukan Day. Now we'll see about the complete aspect of Lachit Borphukan, and we'll also talk about Ahom dynasty also related to Lachit Borphukan. We'll see that. And after this, the next major important topic we call it as IBCA was in news. Now IBCA was in news, and second one we call it as the IBSA was also in news. Now what is IBSA? Now the three trilateral countries, one which includes India, second one we call it as what? Second one we call it as Brazil, and the third one we call it as the South Africa. Again this took place on the sidelines of what? On the sidelines of, we call it as G20, which was held in again Johannesburg. We'll see that, and we'll also talk about majorly we call it as the BIRSA 101. BIRSA 101. It's a treatment. It's a treatment to treat with respect to what? Treat with respect to, we call it as the sickle-celled anemia. We'll see that also. Now BIRSA 101, and we'll also talk about it is the various the topics which majorly includes the science and technology topic called as LCA Tejas. We will talk about the mission called as Hammer mission between India and France. We'll see that also. And we will also talk about various schemes called as related to rare earth magnet. We'll see. Now we'll see all those things one by one. It is by analyzing about the topics, and we'll also solve the MCQs also. We'll also solve MCQs also one by one. Now under this, the first and the foremost topic, we call it as G20. Yes is on an exactly yes. Good evening. I hope it is audible, visible. Now the first one we call it as G20 summit. Now with respect to G20 summit, now why this G20 was in news? Now whenever we are discussing about any topic, the first thing we call it as why it was in news. Now with respect to news, the first news we call it as the recently the 20th edition of the G20 which held at where? Which took place at we call it as we call it as Johannesburg. Now where is this Johannesburg? It's in we call it as South Africa. We'll see all the things one by one. We'll also see about South Africa. We'll also see about the G20 also, one by one here. Done? Now first one, now what do you mean by this G20? First one, what do you mean by this G20 means? First, G20 andre enu. What is G20? Now first one we call it as, now what is the G20? About G20? First, it's a group of, understand my question here. Now it's a group of, we call it as, it's a group of countries belongs to which one? Developed countries as well as the developing countries. Which is showing with respect to we call it as the higher size of the economy, the gigantic size of the economy, and such countries we call as what? G20. Be cautious. Now it's a group of both the developed and developing countries which should have gigantic economy, and such countries will be a part of what? Such countries will be a part of the G20. Now what's the difference between BRICS and G20? What's the difference between the BRICS and G20? First, what's the difference between BRICS and G20? Now under BRICS, the countries includes both developed and developing, but the countries should show higher GDP growth rate. Understand my question? Now it includes again both developed and developing, but the growth rate should be what? Growth rate should be, we call it as higher. The growth rate should be at least, it is higher than we call it as 4%. And such countries we call it as what? Such countries will be a part of BRICS. But now if I'm asking a question about, now which all countries can be a part of G20? Now the countries which can include developed and developing, but it should show a gigantism of an economy, and such countries will be a part of what? Such countries will be a part of G20, developed and developing, which should show what? Which should show, we call it as gigantic. Which should show gigantic, it is G, or the gigantic we call it as the economy. Gigantic we call it as economy, and such countries we call it as what? Such countries we call it as G20. Yes or no? Now my second question is, now what is the composition of, we call it as, what is the composition of G20? How many countries are a part of this G20? It is 19 plus 1 plus 1. Now what is this 19 plus 1 plus 1 means? Now 19 countries means we call it as individual countries. 19 individual countries, and 1 we call it as the European Union, and recently joined the organization we call it as African Union. Be cautious. Now 19 plus 1 plus 1, it is G20 does not include 20 countries. G20 includes 19 individual countries. 1 we call it as European Union. Now how many countries does European Union includes? Now it includes 27 countries. How many countries are a part of African Union? 55 countries. Now 55, 27 and 19. How many? Now in and around we call it as 100 plus countries. 100 plus countries. Be cautious. G20 is not a group of the 20 countries, rather it is a group of, we call it as more than 20 countries, which includes both the developed and developing, and the economy should be what? Gigantic in nature. Gigantic in nature. And you can aram say now. Now is Sri Lanka part of this? Is Sri Lanka part of G20? Is the Pakistan part of G20? Now what about Afghanistan? Now all those are smaller countries. What about South Sudan? What about Zimbabwe? What about South Africa? Yes. What about Brazil? What about we call it as, now what about with respect to Indonesia? Yes. What about USA? What about Africa, or I can say European Union? What about Ethiopia? Yes. Now you should know what is G20 andre. G20 which include developed and developing, which should have a gigantic economy. Gigantic economy, and such countries will be part of what? G20. Yes, this is about our first one. Second one is composition. And the third one, when was this G20 established? When was this G20 established? What is the origin of G20? Now origin of G20, there are two origins. There are the two important origins. One we call it as, in the year we call it as 1999. And the second one in the year we call it as the 2007. Now sir, in the year 1999, what has happened? Now before to 1999, in the year 1977, or you can say 1997 to 1998, now there was an Asian financial crisis. There was an, which crisis? Asian financial crisis. After the Asian financial crisis, we established the G20, the first track. And that first track we call it as Finance Minister track, or we call it as Finance track. First one we call it as, which track was that? The Finance track was established. Now in the Finance track, who will be a part of Finance track? Who will be a part of Finance track? Now there are two composition, or two members will be a part of this. One which includes Finance Minister, and the second one we call it as the RBI governors. Now in the year 2007, now be cautious, in the year 1997, after we call it as Asian financial crisis, the first track of G20 has been established, and that track we call it as what? Finance track. And in that finance track, there are two composition. There are two members are included across the different countries, and that includes Finance Minister and the RBI governors are a part of, we call it as G20. First one. Now second origin took place in the year we call it as 2007. In the year 2007, now this finance track has been expanded now to include a track called as Head of the State, and that Head of the State we call it as Sherpa track. Now normally that track we call it as Head of the Government. Head of the Government, normally we call it as Sherpa track. Now normally they have asked a question about, it has various exams, Sherpa track is related to. Sherpa track is related to which one? Now Sherpa track, and that Sherpa track has been expanded in which year? In the year we call it as 2007, and that we got to the governments. That track we call it as Sherpa track. Yes or no? This is about the origin of, we call it as G20. Second one. The third one, sir, after this comes our, now in the recent year, that 2025. In the year 2025, we call it as the 20th edition of the G20. And this 20th edition of G20, that took place in where? It is Johannesburg. Perfect. The 20th edition of, we call it as G20, that took place in, we call it as, it is Johannesburg, and that we call it as South Africa. First one. The second one, now what was the outcome here? What was the outcome? Now outcome we call it as, it is the outcome. The outcome we call it as the Johannesburg outcome. The Johannesburg outcome, the major focusing upon, we call it as, and that outcome we call it as the Johannesburg Declaration. And that outcome we call it as which one? The Johannesburg outcome we call it as Johannesburg Declaration. That outcome we call it as Johannesburg Declaration. Now this Johannesburg Declaration has been opposed by which country? Opposed by USA. Despite opposal, we passed this declaration. Despite the opposition from USA. I'll discuss. Now despite the opposition from USA, it is the G20 countries have proposed and have passed the declaration, we call it as Johannesburg Declaration. Yes or no? Second. The third major important one, now this is the first time G20 is organized in an African continent. Be cautious. This is the first time G20 has been organized in which continent? It is on the soil of Africa. On the soil of Africa, for the first time this G20 was being organized. Done. This is about the third one. Fourth one, what is the theme of this G20? It is the theme of G20, we call it as SES. What is SES? One S means we call it as solidarity. One S we call it as solidarity. Second one we call it as equality. And the third one we call it as what? The third one we call it as sustainability. Focusing on the solidarity, equality and sustainability. That was the theme. Now what will be the highlights now? Now highlights will be focusing upon, we call it as solidarity. Focusing upon, we call it as equality of all the countries. And focusing upon which one? Sustainability. Now as a part of solidarity, now which country is being impacted heavily with respect to climate change? Now majorly we call it as African countries. The developing countries, the least developed countries are being impacted heavily. If that is the case, who should provide finances? Who should provide finances to such countries? Developed countries. Solidarity. Nothing but we need to make it as African country that disaster resilient. We call it as disaster resilient. We need to make African countries disaster resilient because of changing climate change. Because of the changing the climate, the weather and climate change also. Second one we need to focus on equality of all the countries. Equality of all the countries, equality of races, equality of, we call it as equality of the major one, the people also. Equality of the caste, equality of the region, equality of community and equality of races also. Second. Third one, we should also focus on which one? Environmental sustainability. And that environmental sustainability we call it as the 3R approach. That we call it as reduce, reuse and recycle. And that approach we call it as sustainable development of the country should also take place. Sustainable development of the country should also take place, and this has been opposed by, majorly opposed by USA, majorly focusing on disaster resilience. This has been opposed, and despite opposal, the countries have, it has proposed and countries have passed the declaration also, and that declaration we call it as what? Johannesburg Declaration. Yes or no? Johannesburg Declaration, this is our first one. Second one. Sir, what is the advantages of, we call it as G20? Why we require G20? Why we require G20 first? It is majorly. Now, what is the contribution done by the G20 towards the world GDP? And what is the contribution which has been done by, we call it as, it is towards the trade of the world? And what is the contribution which has been done with respect to, we call it as population? First, now with respect to population, this G20 countries contributes to what percentage? 66% of, we call it as, world population. With respect to trade, it constitutes what percentage? 75%. And the third one, now towards GDP, it contributes to what percentage? Now 80 to 85% of GDP, which is contributed by which countries? The G20 countries. And this is the advantage of, we call it as, advantage of the G20 towards the outside the world. Exactly, yes. Outside the world. Yes. Now along with the things, now we'll see a little bit about, we call it as, now India's contribution towards the G20. Now when did India organize the India's G20? In the year 2023. In the year 2023, under a theme called as, which theme? Under a theme called as One Earth, One World. We call it as, majorly we call it as One Future, or it is also called as Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The one sun, one earth, one world and one future also. And the theme we call it as Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Nothing but it is, the complete world is like a family. The complete world is like a family, and that we call it as Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Yes or no? It is in the year 2023 India organized, and that also you should be aware as a part of, we call it as, the India's G20 summit. Yes, in India's G20 summit itself, the three things took place. One we call it as addition of which one? African Union. Addition of, it is the new organization, the 55 member grouping, that we call it as African Union has been added. Second one, we call it as the GBA has been added. Now what is the GBA? It is Global Biofuel Alliance has been established. Second one we call it as the Global Biofuel Alliance, the green economy, focusing on green economy. And the third proposed one we call it as IMEC. What's the IMEC? India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor has been proposed by India as a part of, we call it as what? As a part of India's G20 summit. As a part of India's, we call it as G20 summit. Yes. Along with the things, we should also know about little bit aspect related to, we call it as, it is G20. Now what do you mean by Trioca? Now where is the headquarters of G20? Where is the secretariat? There is no headquarters, there is no secretariat also. But yaar sir organize ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ? Now who will organize this G20? Now it is organized by, we call it as Trioca. And that Trioca, what do you mean by Trioca? There is no headquarters and there is no secretariat also. Now this is being organized by, we call it as Trioca. Now what is this Trioca? Now tri means three, Oka means countries. Now the three countries which includes past country, present country and the future country. Now which is the present country? Present was country. Which was the past country and which was the future country, or which will be the future country? Now the present country, I have already said that present country we call it as which one? South Africa. The last country we call it as what? The Brazil. And the future country will be USA. And the next 21st G20 summit will be organized by USA. Be cautious. Highlight important one, and you should know about the South African, the declaration, or it's also called as Johannesburg Declaration. Now in Johannesburg Declaration, they talked about climate change finance. They talked about, we call it as achieving Paris Agreement. Achieving, we call it as, it is curbing the security, or we call it as increasing, we call it as, it is security of the countries by curbing drug trafficking, human trafficking, terrorism. And they also focused on, we call it as reforming UNSC, United Nations Security Council. They also released a document called as Mission 300. for providing electricity across we call it as the major African countries. They also talk about it is mission, it is the 300 by 2030, all those things has been proposed as a part of we call it as African Union. Yes or no? This is what we call it as the complete aspect related to we call it as G20. I have discussed about G20 when it has been established in the year 1999. First one, Finance Minister track, and later it has been expanded to we call it as Sherpa track in the year 2007, head of the Minister State. And after this there is no headquarters, and this headquarters will be managed by we call it as Trioka, the past, the present and the future countries. The past country is Brazil, present country is South Africa, and the future country we got is what? USA. And you should also know about this, the 20th edition, focusing on UNSC, focusing on South-South cooperation, focusing on curbing of terrorism, security, climate change, disaster resilience, all these things has been, it has focused, or all these things has been proposed as a part of G20 declarations. Yes, this is about the complete aspect related to G20 and the Karitivi. Done? Now shall we solve one question? Okay, solve this. Online, pass first. Yes, perfect. One earth, one world and one future. Vasudeva Kutumbakam, population 66%, trade, it is world trade 75 and 85% with respect to GDP, yes. Mission 300 by 2030, providing electricity to 300 million people. That we'll discuss. Sherpa, G20, yes. Finance Minister and the Central Bank Directors, they are a part of this. Okay now. Now is this fine or what? What's the answer for this? Now what's the answer for this? Now first one with respect to, see whenever you understood a topic and now you should apply the topics on ground. Now first one with respect to 20th edition, be cautious. This is the 20th edition. Now which took place in, we call it as Johannesburg. Now I said that the 20th G20 summit was the first ever G20 summit in which continent, on which soil? African soil. And in the African continent with the member nations accounting for 75% of global trade. It is no. It is, I have just reversed this. 85% of global GDP, and we call it as 75% of what? It is global trade, and 66% of what? It is population. This is the game, boss. It is, you should remember a little bit factuals also. Every time it's not about concept, it's all about it is concept with, it is the factuals also. The first one, it is incorrect. Second one, the G20 Johannesburg Leaders Declaration. Leaders Declaration was adapted, it was despite the boycott by USA. Yes, second one is correct, I said that. It is third one, Mission 300, highlighted at the summit, aims to provide, is it drinking water or electricity? It is for electricity. It is not for drinking water, it is to provide electricity to how many million people? The 300 million people by which year? By 2030. Why always 2030? Because by 2030 we'll be achieving the SDG goals. It has 17 goals and 169 targets. What is the rank of India with respect to SDG? It is 99. With respect to India, which state is ranked top? Uttarakhand and Kerala is the top. Now with respect to northeastern state, which northeastern state is at the top? Northeast SDG index, Manipur. At the lowest, we call it as Arunachal Pradesh. This at least you should know, boss. And this report is released by, we call it as, at the world level it is released by United Nations Sustainable Development Network. It's not WIPO. WIPO releases world, we call it as innovation report. Hope you're getting it. Now that you should be aware. Now what it is at the world level, we call it as United Nations Sustainable Development Network, SDN. According to that, for the first time, India has been ranked within 100. Within 100, that is 99. And second one, within India, it was released by Niti Aayog. Now with respect to Niti Aayog, the top states, we call it as Uttarakhand and Kerala, has been ranked the first. Both the states at first. And third one, the Northeast Index. The Northeastern SDG Index, not released by Niti Aayog, released by Donair. Released by Donair. What do you mean by Donair? Development of Northeastern region, supported by Niti Aayog. According to this, top state we call it as Mizoram, and lowest state we call it as Arunachal Pradesh. At least you should know about this. It is, it is Mizoram. It is Mizoram, it is the top one, and with respect to the lowest we call it as the Arunachal Pradesh. Arunachal, the Pradesh has been ranked it is the lowest. This you should be aware. Exactly, yes. Done? At least basics. And the third one, it is Mission the 300. Be cautious. Mission 300, it is for providing of electricity, not for providing of drinking water. Now, which is the scheme we have in India to provide drinking water to at least to rural areas? It is Jal Jeevan Mission. Now, we call it as Jal Jeevan Mission. What is the target of JJM? 2028. It is, we need to provide 55 liters of drinking water to the rural areas. It is by the year 2028. 55 liters per person per day. It is by the year 2028. Yes, that at least you should be aware. Now they are asking about which of the following is are correct. Which of the following is are correct? Now which of the following is are correct here? It is only one is correct. Now which one is only one? It is option B. Option B. And add one more point, sir, in G20, the decisions are being taken in what manner? Is it by simple majority or special majority or with consensus, unanimous decision? It is taken up by, we call it as consensus. It is taken up by, we call it as consensus. What do you mean by consensus? It should be approved by all the countries. It should be approved by all the countries. Yes, yes, exactly online. Pradeep, thank you. Yes, yes. Done. This about we call it as, the 20th we call it as the summit of G20 2025. Done with the game now? Yes. See, other than this, not even a single question will be out of this topic. I'm literally betting you. History 10 kelta. Yes or no? You should know about all the things. And if you want, you can, it is add about the organizations, the international organizations, something like G2, I've discussed already G2, it is G4, followed by it is the G7, followed by it is G10, G12, G13, 33, G20, all the things. Yes or no? At least you should know about all the things. Done? First topic is that, G20. And the second most important, the core topic, we call it as which one? The second major important topic we call it as, it is Operation Sagar Mitra, or we call it as, it is the Sagar Bandhu. Now we call it as, what do you mean by Sagar? What do you mean by Sagar? Sagar means the coast or an ocean. Sagar means we call it as the coast or an ocean. And second one, it is Bandhu means it's a close relative. The Bandhu means we call it as the close relative. Now, which country is the close relative in our coastal states? It is Sri Lanka. Hope you're getting it. Now, that is we call it as Sri Lanka. First one. Second one. Now, this Operation Sagar Bandhu has been launched by India as an HADR operation, humanitarian and disaster relief operation. Now, against which one? Against we call it as the cyclone. Against cyclone which one? Against the cyclone we call it as, it is we call it as the Ditwa. Majorly we call it as, it is the majorly we call it as, against we call it as the Ditwa. Majorly we call it as against Ditwa. Done? Now we'll see all the things one by one. Let us have some patience. We'll see one by one. Now what is this? What do you mean by the cyclone Ditwa? Now we'll see all the things about it. Is anyways we have talked about the basics about the cyclones. Now only we'll be talking about what is Ditwa. And second one we'll be talking about it is the different operations which have been launched by India. different operations which has been launched by India. We'll see all those things. Now first and foremost question here is, what do you mean by this, the cyclone Ditwa means? What do you mean by this cyclone Ditwa? Now what does Ditwa means? It is that Ditwa means in a MN language. In a MN language we call it as lagoon. What do you mean by lagoon? What do you mean by lagoon? Lagoon means a lake which is created by, we call it as erosion and deposition of sea waves. A lagoon means a lake which has been created by which one? Created by, we call it as the sea waves. Created by, we call it as sea waves. Now which is the largest lagoon we have in India? It is largest lagoon, we call it as the Chilika Lake. The Chilika Lake, that is the largest in India, which is present in, we call it as in Odisha. In Odisha, in the same manner, this lagoon, it is also present in MN. Now this word Ditwa has been provided by, we call it as, provided by which country? Provided by MN. In MN language. In MN language, it is, the Ditwa means what? Lagoon. And this Ditwa, it is present in, we call it as, MN's territory, we call it as Socotra. It is, we have a island, we have an island that belongs to MN, and this island is present in which ocean? Indian Ocean. It is present in Indian Ocean, and that country we call it as Socotra. And this Socotra, it is controlled by which country? It is MN. Now the name of this Ditwa has been provided by which country? Provided by MN. In MN language, it is, the lagoon means what? Ditwa. This Ditwa is the largest lagoon which is present in where? Socotra Island, which is present in, we call it as Socotra Island, and the Socotra Island belongs to a country called as MN. Done first one. Now second one, this Ditwa is impacting which country? This Ditwa is impacting which country? It is Sri Lanka. This Ditwa is impacting a country called as, has impacted a country called as, it is Sri Lanka. Now when there is cyclone, don't you think there will be huge amount of flooding? There is huge amount of flooding. Now to evacuate the people, Indian government has launched an operation, and that operation we call it as which one? Operation the Sagar, the Mitra, or we call it as Sagar Bandhu. Hope you're getting it. And the Sagar Mitra or Sagar Bandhu, it is a, we call it as HADR operation. What is HADR? It's not a military exercise. Rather, it is a humanitarian and to reduce the disaster relief also. It is to reduce the disaster. And the other reason we call it as humanitarian and disaster relief operation, which has been launched by which country? India, to evacuate the people from Sri Lanka and to provide them with adequate food, medicine, followed by the shelter, followed by health facilities, all those things. And that operation we call it HADR operations. Now as a part of this, we call it Operation Sagar Bandhu, which all it is vehicles has been sent to, we call it as Sri Lanka. The two important vehicles that has been sent, that is indigenously designed, and that we call it as INS Vikrant, and we call it as INS Udayagiri. The two indigenous which is made in India, and that we call it as INS Vikrant. And this INS Vikrant, it is completely designed in India, and this we call it as the carrier. INS Vikrant is a indigenous, the one which has been completely designed in where? Designed and developed by India. It is as a part of Atmanirbhar Bharat. It's a carrier. It's the carrier one. It carries the different goods. And second one we call it as the INS Udayagiri. INS Udayagiri has been sent as a part of which one? Operation the Sagar, the Bandhu or Sagar Mitra, 2 we call it as Sri Lanka. Second question. Now is this fine now? Now second question is, sir, why we have sent or why we have launched HDR operation? Because Sri Lanka comes as a part of, we call it as our neighborhood first policy. It comes under our, we call it as the Gujarat Doctrine. It comes under our, we call it as Gujarat Doctrine. What does this Gujarat Doctrine talks about? It is neighborhood first policy. Our neighbors are more important and we need to give more attention to our neighbors. Majorly which includes Sri Lanka, Maldives, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, all these countries. That Gujarat Doctrine we call it as what? Gujarat Doctrine we call it as the neighborhood first policy. Neighborhood we call it as first policy. And second one, this humanitarian has been launched as a part of, we call it as Mahasagar Doctrine. As a part of, we call it as Mahasagar. I have already discussed in the last class. What is this Mahasagar? Maritime heads of security and growth across the region. This has been launched as a part of these 2 doctrines. Neighborhood first policy, giving priority to our neighbors is more important. And that we call it as neighborhood first policy doctrine. And the second one we call it as Mahasagar. Maritime heads of security and growth across the region. Security and growth across the region. Exactly, yes. Done. It is majorly we call it as, this is about, we call it as the complete aspect related to Operation Sagar Bandhu. Done. Now shall we see some operations which has been launched by India as a part of HDR? Shall we see that? Okay, first one. Now first one. Now it is, which is the operation related to, we call it as Operation Sagar Bandhu. Sagar Bandhu related to which country? Sri Lanka. Second one we call it as the Operation Sindhu. Operation Sindhu, fast. You should try, at least you should be active. We call it as Iran. And the third one, Operation Devi Shakti. Afghanistan. Operation Devi Shakti. We call it as Afghanistan. Evacuated people after Taliban takeover. And this is related to, we call it as Operation Sindhu, related to Iran. Then there is a conflict between Iran, Israel and USA. Iran, Israel and USA. And Indian operation launched a mission called as Operation Sindhu. It's not Operation Sindoor. Be cautious. Operation Sindoor is a military exercise. It's not a HDR operation. It's not a HDR operation against Pakistan. Fourth, Operation Maitri. Operation Maitri related to, we call it as Nepal. Related to earthquakes in Nepal in 2015. Nepal. And next one, Operation Samudra Shakti. Samudra, the Shakti related to Indonesia. Related to, we call it as Indonesia. Again related to floods and cyclones in Indonesia. The next, Operation Dost. Operation the Dost. Now Turkey-Syria earthquake. Now related to, we call it as the Turkey or Turkey. Turkey-Syria earthquake. Turkey-Syria earthquake. The next one we call it as, Operation Kaveri. Operation Kaveri, evacuating people from Sudan. It is Sudan or South Sudan. Next one we call it as Operation Ajay. Operation Ajay related to Israel-Palestine conflict. The next one we call it as Operation Ganga. Operation Ganga related to Ukraine-Russia conflict. Related to Ukraine-Russia conflict. Next, Operation Indravati. Operation Indravati related to Haiti, evacuating people from Haiti. Haiti, yes, it is Operation Rahat. Operation Rahat. Operation Rahat, we call it as Yemen. And next we call it as Operation Sankat Mochan. Operation Sankat Mochan related to Myanmar. Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, all those countries. Sankat Mochan. Yes, yes. Highly important. Yemen, yes, yes. Indravati done. Operation Karuna also related to Myanmar. Operation Karuna. Operation Karuna. Yes, yes. Operation Karuna also related to, we call it as the Myanmar part. Yes. This is about the different operations. This year for sure there will be question on this HADR. This year there will be questions related to, we call it as which one? HADR operations. Done? Okay. Any doubts? Huh. Okay. The next one anyways we have discussed about Sri Lanka in the last class itself. Now the next one related to Sri Lanka. Some more few points because it has been impacted by the, we call it as the Ditwa. Now first one we call it as, it's an island country. Near to which state? Near to Tamil Nadu. And which is the disputed territory we have? Disputed territory we have. Now the disputed territory we call it as Kachativu Islands. Now which is the vertical bridge which has been constructed between India and Sri Lanka? Pamban Bridge. The vertical bridge, we call it as the Pamban Bridge. Pamban, the bridge. And which is the first sea bridge which has been constructed? Which is the sea bridge which has been constructed? Again in Tamil Nadu. Connecting, we call it as connecting Vivekananda Island with, it is Tiruvalluvar region. Connecting Tiruvalluvar with, we call it as Vivekananda. It is the island. And that is considered to be the India's first, the sea glass bridge. The first sea glass bridge which has been constructed in, we call it as Tamil Nadu. Yes, except that we have discussed, rest we have discussed in our last class itself. Jayavardhanepura, Colombo, we have talked about different military exercises, Colombo security dialogue, all those things we have discussed in our last class itself. Done? This is about, we call it as the concepts related to, we call it as operation, it is the Sagar Bandhu. Done? Okay. What's the for this? Okay. Now, Operation Sagar Bandhu was launched by India to deliver humanitarian assistance to Sri Lanka after Cyclone Ditwa involving the Indian Navy, Air Force and NDRF. Yes, that's correct. Second one, Cyclone Ditwa was not named by UAE, rather it has been named by MN following the regional naming system for North Indian Ocean cyclones. The Ditwa means we call it as the lagoon. That lagoon is present in, we call it as Socotra Island, which belongs to MN. Which belongs to MN. Now second one is incorrect and first one is correct. What's the answer for this? It is option C. The next one getting called as MN. Next one called as MN. Now what is MN? Where is MN? Fastest. It is MN, it is present in, we call it as West Asia, or it is present in Middle East. First one, MN, location. What is location? West Asia, or it is called as the Middle East. West Asia, or it is called as Middle East. Yes or no? Second one, what is the capital of MN? Capital of MN we call it as Sana'a. Capital of MN we call it as Sana'a. Capital of MN we call it as Sana'a. And the third one, now it is, which is the rebel groups which are present in MN? It is Houthis. These Houthis are being supported by which country? Iran. To attack against which country? Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia. Supported by Iran to attack which country? Saudi Arabia. Why? Because the Saudi Arabia, it is controlled or supported by USA. Saudi USA, and they are against Iran. That you should be aware. And the fourth one, now which is the island which we have with respect to MN, we call it as Socotra. Socotra Island, which is present in, we call it as, it is Arabian Sea or Indian Ocean. Arabian Sea, or we call it as in Indian Ocean, west of India. Socotra Island, it is present in west of India. Near to, we call it as, it is which state? Majorly we call it as, it is majorly towards the Gulf or Babel Mandab Strait. Babel Mandab Strait. To the south of MN we have Socotra. To the south of, we call it as MN, we have Socotra Island. Yes or no? Yes. I hope you are getting it. Online? Yes or no? Yes, yes. This is about our second one. The third one we call it as IPSA. What do you mean by it is IPSA? IPSA is different, IPSA is different. What is IPSA? Now it is, we call it as, it is India, Brazil, and we call it as the South Africa. It's a first one. Why this was in use? Why this was in use? Now it is India, the major we call it as South Africa and Brazil. The Brazil president and prime ministers, it is met on the sidelines of what? At the sidelines of, we call it as, sidelines of which one? Johannesburg. On the sidelines of, we call it as Johannesburg. Now IPSA meeting took place on the sidelines of, we call it as, it is Johannesburg. Yes or no? This is our first one. Second one, what do you mean by IPSA? What do you mean by it is, we call it as, it is IPSA first. What is IPSA? Now IPSA means it's a trilateral. It's the trilateral, the countries. Now developing countries, be cautious. Trilateral development countries from 3 different continents. Be cautious, it's not a military agreement. Rather, it is a developmental agreement or a developmental organization with respect to 3 important countries from 3 important continents. Now, what do the 3 important continents means? One from South America, one from Africa, one from Asia. From Asia, it is India. From Africa, South Africa. From America, we call it which one? It is Brazil. Now it's a developmental trilateral organization from it is, we call it as which one? 3 continents. From, we call it as 3 continents. Yes or no? Second one. Now when was this established? It was established in the year 2003. Perfect. Under a declaration called as Brasilia Declaration. Under a declaration called as Brasilia Declaration. Under a declaration called as, it is Brasilia Declaration. Where is Brasilia? It's a capital of, we call it as the Brazil. It is the major, it is a place present in, we call it as Brazil. It is under a declaration called as Brasilia. We call it as which one? Brasilia Declaration. Yes or no, boss? Now sir, my simple question is, why this IPSA was in use? And why we want this IPSA? Why this want this IPSA? Majorly, it is to enhance the South-South cooperation. What do you mean by this South-South cooperation means? What do you mean by this South-South cooperation? Now if you understand, now observe this, if you understand this, the complete world, now this is 0 degree. Now majority of the least developing and we call it as developing countries, is it present towards the north or towards the south? It is south. Majority of, we call it as majority of developing and least developed countries are present towards the south. And highly developed countries towards the north. And that is the reason we call it as north-north cooperation, and this we call it as south-south cooperation. Except Australia and New Zealand. Australia and New Zealand, though it is present in south, it is highly developed. Except that majority of the countries comes under where? Developing, and we call it as, it is least developed countries. Now to enhance the cooperation between, we call it as the south-south, we are going for, we call it as IPCA. We call it as IPCA. It is majorly, we call it as, sorry, it is IPSA. Majorly we call it as IPSA has been the established. We call it as India, Brazil, and we call it as South Africa has been established in the year 2003. Second one in the next year. Now don't you think, now to organize these summits, don't you think we want funds? Now for that fund we have established, we call it as IPSA fund has been established in which year? 2004. IPSA fund has been established. IPSA fund has been established in the year, we call it as 2004. And after that, it is, we have also established military exercise also, and that we call it as IPSA-MAR. We call it as IPSA-MAR. What do you know IPSA-MAR? It is India, it is Brazil, South Africa, maritime exercise. Maritime exercise, it's a military exercise between these 3 countries. It's a military exercise between these 3 countries. And that we call it as which one? That we call it as IPSA-MAR. That we call it as IPSA-MAR. Hope you're getting it. And this is to enhance which one? South-South cooperation. South-South cooperation. Yes or no? It is in this 2025 summit. In this 2025 the summit, it is, they spoke about exchanging of technologies. Exchanging of technologies across the, it is 3 countries, across the developing and the least developed countries, and they focused on providing, we call it as health, focusing on education, focusing on cyber security, focusing on, we call it as reforming the United Nations Security Council, focusing on, we call it as disaster resilience, focusing on, we call it as climate change. All these things has also been discussed as a part of which one? IPSA. It is India, Brazil, and we call it as the South, the Africa as a part of this. Done? This is we call it as the IPSA part. Yes. Now highly and highly important one, you should also know about, we call it as, it is IPSA, the complete one, IPSA fund, when it has been established, what's objective, what is South-South cooperation, what is 2025 summit, all those things. Done? Okay. If it is clear, it is all this. Yes, IPSA more also. Done? Okay. Option 1 and 2, 1 and 3, it is 2 and 3 and 1, 2, 3. Common options. What is the answer for that? Okay. Now here the most important one is which is incorrect. Now with respect to which of the following the statements are correct regarding it is IPSA. India, the Brazil, and we call it as the South Africa. Now dialogue forum, the IPSA forum has been established in which year? 2003 through the Brasilia Declaration. Through the Brasilia Declaration with its permanent headquarters located in where? It is permanent headquarters which is located in, we call it as Belém, Brazil. Now this it is IPSA does not have permanent headquarters. Permanent headquarters. Now first one, okay. Second one, the IPSA fund. The IPSA fund managed by United Nations Office of South-South Cooperation, correct? Supports the development projects in mainly in where? Least developed countries. Second one is correct. First one is incorrect. Third one, IPSA is a trilateral forum focusing on, we call it as political coordination, development cooperation and South-South partners until here it is fine. But China is not an observer. China is not an observer. If that's the case, even third option is also incorrect. Now which is incorrect here? 1 and 3 is incorrect. 1 and 3 is incorrect. There is no permanent headquarters. Exactly online, exactly Karna. Good evening. Yes. Perfect. Done. This is all about our which one? It is majorly we call it as the majorly. About we call it as the complete about IPSA. The next one. Next topic we call it as Lachit Borpukhan. Lachit Borpukhan. Now recently on we call it as the November 24th. November 24th. It is the birth anniversary. The birth anniversary of which one? The birth anniversary of Lachit Borpukhan has been celebrated. And this has been celebrated on, now what is the birthplace of Lachit Borpukhan? It is Lachit Borpukhan was born on, we call it as the November 24th, 1622. It is majorly we call it as, it is 1622. It is 24th November we call it as 1622 in a place called as Chardio. It's in Assam. In a place called as, we call it as the Chardio, which is present in where? Assam. First one done. Second one. Now, who was he? Why are we celebrating his birth anniversary as we call it as Lachit Borpukhan Divas? Why? Because he fought against the Mughal rulers. He was a commander. It is majorly. Now, who was he? He was a commander. Now, what was his designation? What was his occupation? Occupation was he was the commander of which dynasty of Assam? Ahom dynasty of Assam. In this Ahom dynasty, he was one of the most popular commander-in-chief. He was the commander-in-chief of which one? He was the commander in, we call it as the chief. Commander-in-chief of, we call it as Ahom dynasty. Yes or no? Ahom dynasty. Third one, why is more famous? Why is more famous? Because he fought against it is the Mughal ruler. He fought against the Mughal ruler, and that Mughal ruler's expansion to northeast has been broken down by, we call it as Lachit Borphukan. The expansion of Mughal, the dynasty towards the northeast has been blocked by a commander called as which commander? Lachit Borphukan. Now that Lachit Borphukan, now he stopped it is Raja Ram Singh I of Mughal the dynasty. Be cautious, he fought against, we call it as the war. And that operation or the war, we popularly called it as operation, we call it as what? It is Sarai Ghati. It is the war, we call it as the Sarai Ghati. It is that Sarai Ghati was fought between, we call it as the Mughal, the dynasty that was headed by, we call it as majorly, that was headed by, we call it as Raja Ram Singh I. Be cautious. Raja Ram Singh I versus we call it as Ahom dynasty military commander, we call it as Lachit Borphukan. Lachit Borphukan. Who won the war? Now majorly it has been won by, we call it as Lachit Borphukan, or Ahom dynasty rulers won this war. Now this led to, we call it as curbing up of the Mughal dynasty towards which region? Northeastern region. This shows the bravery, the leadership, and we call it as fighting for a dynasty. That means it is the major, we call it as the country comes first than the family. His famous slogan of Lachit Borphukan shows the braveriness, the leadership quality, and we call it as fighting for a country. That we call it as patriotism. Now because of all these things, now every year NDA, what is NDA? National Defense Academy provides an award since 1999. Now since 1999 as it is Lachit Borphukan Award. Lachit Borphukan Award has been provided by whom? Has been provided by NDA on the contribution done by whom? On the contribution done by, we call it as Lachit Borphukan, in the form of leadership, courage, the bravery, patriotism, and every year it is NDA provides Lachit Borphukan Award to it is one we have shown courage, bravery, patriotism towards the nation. And this award is being provided since, we call it as 1999. Not only this, we have also established 125 feet. 125 feet, it is Lachit Borphukan. The Lachit Borphukan statue has also been established at where? In the birthplace of Assam. Not only this, it is the Prime Minister has also released a book related to, we call it as Lachit Borphukan, the complete, we call it as the story about Lachit Borphukan. This is about, we call it as the Lachit, the Borphukan, the bravery, the courage, and leadership towards the country. The country comes first than the family. than the family, or than we call it as it is our own close, the friends or the relatives. Emotions comes later than the nation. Yes or no? Yes, we call it as this is about the complete aspect about the Lachit, the Bor, the Pukan. Now be cautious, the Lachit, Bor, Pukan, the famous battle we call it as, the famous battle. Now we call it as in 1671 AD. In 1671 AD, and that we call it as Sarai Ghati, which was present between Raja Ram Singh I of Mughal rulers and Lachit Borpukhan of Ahom dynasty. Ahom we call it as the dynasty. Yes, this is about first one. Second one, little bit information about Ahom dynasty. It is, we call it as the Ahom dynasty. We call it as Ahom dynasty. Now what is the location of Ahom dynasty? Who established the Ahom dynasty? First one. Now what is the location of Ahom dynasty? Northeast. Ahom dynasty location is northeastern states, majorly in Assam. Majorly in Assam. Who was the founder of Ahom dynasty? It is Sukpa. It is the founder, we call it as, it was founded by, we call it as Sukpa. It is founded by, we call it as, it is the Sukpa. Third one. Now what is their tenure? Tenure is, it is from 13th century to 13th century to, it is the first of we call it as 19th century. The first half of we call it as the 19th century is the rule of we call it as Ahom dynasty. The next one, who is the greatest commander of Ahom dynasty? It is Lachit the Borpukhan. The Lachit Borpukhan. Now recently Ahom Moidam. What does this Ahom Moidam means? It is the burial sites. The burial site of Ahom rulers has been declared as what? Has been declared as it is 43rd UNESCO World Heritage Site. Has been declared as we call it as 43rd UNESCO's which one? World Heritage Sites, which is present in where? Which is present in we call it as Assam. Present in we call it as Assam. Exactly, yes. Yes, it is majorly we call it as, it is the major we call it as 43rd UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Now which is the 44th one? It is Maratha Forts. Now we have how many World Heritage Sites as of now? It is 44. As of now we call it as 44, we call it as the majorly. It is World Heritage Sites we have. Now recently Lucknow has been declared as what? Creative Cities Network. It has been added under Creative Cities Network. That you should be aware. Highly and highly important one. We call it as Ahom dynasty. And little bit information about Assam. Little bit information about Assam. First one we call it as first one. Now which is the only state which borders with all the northeastern state? Assam. It borders with all the northeastern state, which includes Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, Meghalaya. It borders with all the 6 northeastern states. 7th is this. It is 6 northeastern states is Assam. Second one. Now which is the capital of Assam? Dispur. Where is the headquarters of Assam? It's in Guwahati. Be cautious. Dispur we call it as capital, and headquarters is present in where? Headquarters is present in Dispur and High Court is present in, we call it as, it is Guwahati. Yes or no? It is Guwahati, exactly for yes. And which is the aquatic animal of, we call it as Assam? It is Gangetic dolphin. Recently which has been declared. It is Ganga dolphin is the state animal of, we call it as, it is Assam. And next one, which was the first state to introduce the satellite phones? Kaziranga National Park. Kaziranga National Park has become the, Namaste online, yes. It is, now the next one we call it as, Yesren Gotam, Rowdy Baby ante. Okay. Just joking online. Okay. Now it is Assam. Now Assam, majorly we call it as, now Assam Ali. Now which is the next one? It is, now which was the first, it is Wildlife Sanctuary National Park to introduce satellite phones. We call it as Kaziranga National Park. Kaziranga National Park. And the next one, now which is the major important, it is animal, endemic animal which was present majorly with respect to Assam. We call it as one-horned rhino. One-horned rhino, highest population is present in where? Kaziranga. Highest density of one-horned rhino? It is present in Phobiotra National Park. Highest density. Highest density. Highest density it is present in where? It is present in, we call it as, it is Phobiotra National Park. Highest density, highest number, Kaziranga. Highest number is Kaziranga. Highest density it is present in, we call it as Phobiotra. It is, we call it as Phobiotra. Phobiotra National Park. Highest density of one-horned rhino. One-horned rhino's IUCN status is vulnerable. IUCN status of, it is one-horned rhino is vulnerable. Next one. Now for the first time, melanistic tiger. Melanistic tiger, it is majorly we call it as, it is Simlipal. What about we call it as albumin tiger? Albumin tiger it is present and we call it as Kaziranga and Manas, and that we call it as Kazi 106F. It is present in Kaziranga, albumin, the white tiger. Albumin means white tiger. Black tiger it's in, it is Simlipal, Odisha. Black tiger it's in Odisha. White tiger we call it as albumin tiger. It is, we call it as albumin. The tiger we named it as Kazi 106F. Kazi 106F, which is present in where? Kaziranga. The first albumin tiger has been observed in, we call it as Kaziranga, and that we call it as the albumin tiger. Now first one, now which person has become the first person to get a Kenton Miller Award? IUCN Kenton Miller Award, we call it as Sonali Ghosh. Now Sonali Ghosh, the director of Kaziranga National Park, she has become the first Indian to receive the Kenton Miller Award. Kenton Miller Award. Yes or no? Now India's first butterfly park, it's in Bengaluru, not in Kaziranga. It is first butterfly park, it's in majorly Bannerghatta. It is Karnataka, not in, we call it as the Assam. Highly important one, you should know about this. And along with this, you should also know about, it is the majorly, the Siliguri corridor, chicken neck corridor, Siliguri corridor, the Siliguri corridor or chicken neck corridor. And next one, it is, we also have, we call it as the chimpanzee, orangutan. It is present only in, we call it as Assam. Only in, we call it as the Assam. Highly important one. Majorly we call it as SS. It's in Bannerghatta. Butterfly Park, the India's first. And only as of now, it is present and we call it as where? It is majorly with respect to, this is all about, it is Assam. And which is the only, it is riverine island we have in the world. Now it's the largest riverine island of It is India. It is Majuli Island. Again present in where? Assam. Now it is world's largest riverine island. World's largest riverine island. We call it as Majuli Island. Riverine island. Island means surrounded by bottom, created by river. Created by the river, and that we call it as yes. Perfect online, yes. It is the own satellite Assam. Yes, Sonali Ghosh. Done. Clear? I hope this is the first one. And the next one, which is the only state to come out with NRC. At Assam, in 1951, NRC. What does NRC means? National Registry of Citizens. Again, Assam. All this, if you know, done in the game Assam. Clear? Yes. Highly important one. Done? Yes or no? Okay. What of this? Okay, only one. Okay, we'll see. First one, consider the following statement regarding Lachit Borphukan. Now, Lachit Borphukan was a commander-in-chief of Ahom dynasty and led the Ahom forces to victory in the Battle of Saraigati in 1671 against the Mughal army, led by it is Raja Ram Singh. It is first one is incorrect. Second one we call it as Ahom dynasty founded by it is the Sukpa, ruled parts of Assam and Northeast from 13th century to we call it as it is the first half of we call it as it is the 19th century. The second one is correct, and the third one, the National Defence Academy awards the Lachit Borphukan the gold medal. It is every year for the best passing out cadets every year. As a tradition beginning, we call it as 1999. One who showed bravery, leadership, courage, patriotism. It is for them, it is automatically, it is NDA, National Defence Academy, provides an award called as, it is the Lachit Borphukan, the gold medal award has been provided. And what's the answer for this? It is B, it is which is incorrect, it is only one is incorrect, correct means it is both 1 and 2 are correct. Yes, highly important one. It is be cautious, this is first one, half is correct, up till here it is correct, it is wrong. Raja Ram Singh won. Raja Ram Singh, one of the Mughal forces. Done. Now second news from, it is again from Northeast, and that we call it as Sangai Festival. The Sangai Festival, now the Sangai Festival has been cancelled. It is because of huge amount of conflict in Manipur. Now this year they have reinstated, this year they have reinstated. In which year? In the year 2025. In the year 2025. Why this was the news? Why this was the news? The first one, recently Sangai Festival has been hosted by, we call it as the Manipur government. Manipur, the government, first one. Second one, sir, the Sangai Festival takes place in, we call it as, which state of Northeast? Now majorly we call it as Manipur. Now why this Sangai? Why this Sangai? Because in Manipur we have an endemic deer population, and that endemic deer population we call it as Sangai deer. It's also called as dancing deer. Now which takes place in which state? Manipur, first one. Second one, this tradition started in which year? This tradition started in, we call it as 2010. The tradition of organizing, it is the culture, the cuisine, the tourism aspect of Manipur started in the year 2010 under a brand name called as Sangai Festival. This started in the year 2010. Normally it is organized by the government of Manipur, majorly to showcase, it is a rich heritage of, we call it as what? Rich heritage of Manipur one. the dance, the culture, the tribal festivals, the food, the cuisine, the tourism aspect to the tourist. Hope you're getting it. It is why this festival is being organized. What's the objective? The major objective here is to showcase the rich heritage of what? Rich heritage of, we call it as Manipur. To showcase the rich heritage of Manipur to the outside world. To the outside the world and outside India also. Majorly which includes dance forms. Which includes the dance forms which include Ras Leela related to Vaishnavism, Ras Leela related to Krishna, the theme called as Krishna, Vaishnavism, and they showcase their own martial art. And which is the martial art? Martial art of Manipur, it is Thang Tha. The martial art of Manipur we call it as Thang Atha. And they also showcases the tribal festivals or the tribal culture of Manipur. Which is the tribal culture we have? Which are the tribals we have? It is Metis, Kukis, Nagas. The different tribal culture which includes the Kukis, the Metis, followed by Nagas, the Kukis, the Metis, and we call it as Nagas, Kukis, the Metis, Nagas culture. And along with these things, they also showcase the cuisine. What do you mean by cuisine? The food items, the different dishes of rice, the bamboo, it is the bamboo dishes. All this are being showcased as a part of, we call it as, it is the rich heritage of, we call it as, the festival called as Sangai Festival. Sangai Festival. Yes or no? It is a major important one. Major important one we call it as, it is the rich heritage. And they also showcase a language called as Manipuri language. It is Manipuri language. It is the Manipuri, the language also, and you should also know about all those things. Yes? Now, is it a part of classical language? No. It is not a part of classical language one. Manipuri is not a classical one. It's a part of 8th schedule. It's a part of 8th schedule official languages. It's a part of scheduled languages also, not a part of classical languages. Yes or no? Classical language, it should be having at least 2000 years of history. 1500 to 2000 years of history. Now, how many languages are a part of it is classical languages? It is, as of now, it is 11. 6 plus 5. This year, we have added 5. Highly important one. First is, we call it as Tamil. Second is Sanskrit. Kannada, it is Andhra or Telugu. Fifth one, we call it as Malayalam, Odishi. 6. And after 6, we have added this year 5. Which is that? Prakrit, Pali, Marathi, followed by Bengali and Assamese. Total 11. Total 11 classical languages, not Manipuri. Manipuri is a part of official languages. Part of scheduled languages, but not a part of classical languages. Be cautious. Done? This is about, we call it as the Sangai Festival. Now, Sangai Festival, the Sangai means it's a deer population. It's a deer population which is an endemic to, we call it as, only to, we call it as Manipur. And based on that only we have named it as Sangai Festival. It is a rich heritage of, we call it as, rich heritage of which one? Rich heritage of, we call it as the Manipur. Rich heritage of Manipur, majorly it is hosted by, we call it as, it is Ministry of the Donair. Ministry of Donair, what does Donair means? Development of Northeastern region. Development of the Northeastern region, it's a ministry. Supported by, it is the separate state governments. They are organizing this festival, we call it as, since 2010. Done, boss? Clear? Next one, about Sangai. About Sangai deer. About, we call it as the Sangai deer. What do you mean by Sangai? What do you mean by Sangai, boss? It's a deer population. Sangai means we call it as the deer population. The Sangai means Dear population, online, perfect. Yes, yes. The Sangai means we call it as, okay. Okay. It is, the Sangai means we call it as dear population. Dear the population. Second one, what is the location of, we call it as Sangai deer? Where is it present? It is present in, we call it as Bishanpur district of Manipur. It is present in, we call it as, it is Bishanpur or Bishnupur district of, we call it as, which state? Manipur. Second. Third one, it is present within, we call it as, within Kebul Lamjo National Park. Within, we call it as Kebul Lamjo National Park. It is present between, or within Kebul Lamjo National Park. Now within this Kebul Lamjo National Park, we have a lake called as which lake? Loktak Lake. Now this is the only floating lake of the world. It is the only floating lake of the world which is present in where? Manipur. Now within this, it is Loktak, there is a floating biomass. And that floating biomass, we call it as what? Fumdis. That floating one we call it as Fumdis. It's only a biomass. Now within this biomass, now this deer population will go for eating this biomass, grasses. Now don't you think, now when it go to this Fumdis or this biomass, don't you think it need to balance or else it will fall towards the water? Now it is balancing, but for the observer, it look like what? It look like dancing, and it is commonly called as dancing deer. It is commonly called as, this Sangai is also called as, which one? Dancing deer. It's not actually dancing, it does not know dancing, but it is balancing its own. It is the presence, rather it is for the observers, it is looking like dancing part. And that we call it as dancing deer. Now what's the IUCN status of dancing deer? It is dancing deer's IUCN status under Wildlife Protection Act of the 1972. It is 1972 Schedule 1. It has been added under Schedule 1. Schedule 1 means highest protection followed by highest punishment also. Highest protection followed by highest punishment, and under IUCN status it has been added under what? Endangered. Endangered means the population less than 2,500 in number. And this is restricted only to this Kebul Lamjo National Park, restricted only to this, the world's only floating, it is wetland or floating national park or floating lake, and that we call it as the Loktak Lake, and that we call it as endemic organisms. What do you mean by endemic means? It is found only and only in that region, and Adana we call it as in the Garitivi, endemic population. That we call it as endemic, the population also. And this is about, we call it as, this is about the complete aspect about the Sangai. We have discussed about Sangai also, we have discussed about Manipur, we have also discussed about, we call it as, the majorly about which one? The majorly about Sangai festival also. It is left out, we'll see a little bit about Manipur. Left out, only left out. Now what do you know about Manipur? What do you know about Manipur? Fast. It's not critically endangered online, be cautious. It is in some website they have said that it is critically endangered, but it is endangered even in the recent times also. Yes or no? Even I cross-verified, it is endangered. It is not critically endangered, but in few websites it has been declared as critically endangered, but it is endangered. Manipur. First one, what is the location of Manipur? It is northeastern state. Northeast state. Capital of Manipur? It is Imphal. It is Imphal. Second one. Third one, which government is controlling Manipur? It is president rule. President rule has been continued up till February 2026. Has been extended up till 2026. President rule. Now, which state has received the highest number of president rules? It is Manipur 11 times. First is Punjab. Highest number is Manipur, followed by Uttar Pradesh 10. Uttar Pradesh 10 times. President rule. President rule means under which article? 56, part 18. 356, part 18. Part 18. And next one, the next one you should know about IMT Trilateral Highway. IMT Trilateral Highway. What is the IMT Trilateral Highway? India, Myanmar, Thailand. India, Myanmar, Thailand. Trilateral Highway. That we call it as IMT Trilateral Highway. Starts from, we call it as More. Starts from, we call it as the More in Manipur, and ends at, we call it as Bangkok. And ends at Bangkok. It's a roadway. It's a road which has been constructed from, we call it as the More district of Manipur up till, we call it as Bangkok. That we call it as the India, Myanmar, Thailand Trilateral Highway. Trilateral Highway. The fourth one with respect to, it is Manipur. Now it is only it is floating lake. Only floating lake. It is Loktak Lake. This Loktak Lake, it is under, we call it as Montreux record. What does Montreux record means? It is highly endangered. Within the wetlands, it is highly riskier. These are wetlands but are facing high risk. From India, only 2 wetlands are under Montreux record. One is, we call it as, it is majorly we call it as, it is the Loktak Lake, and the second one we call it as, which one? It is Kelo Dio. Kelo Dio, it's in Rajasthan. Chilka has been removed. Chilka has been removed. It is the only 2 as of now. We have only 2 as of now under Montreux. Now maintained by Ramsar Convention. Maintained by Ramsar Convention of Wetlands. That you should be aware. And you should know about Tang Tam. Tang Tam, it's a martial art. It is martial art of, we call it as exactly this. It is inner line permit also, it comes on inner line permit also. Now all the 4 states, Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram comes under, it is ILP, inner line permit also. That also you should be aware. And after this, now which is the border security force we have in Manipur? It is, we call it as Assam Rifles. Assam Rifles. Assam Rifles between India and we call it as Myanmar. India and we call it as Myanmar. India and we call it as Myanmar. Right, INS Imphal also, INS Imphal, INS Delhi, INS Visakhapatnam, all those things we have. Yes. We can talk about all those things. Done? This is about, it is Manipur. Solve. Yes. Assam Rifle is the oldest one, exactly on and perfect, yes. Perfect. 356 Myanmar, 11 times, 10 times is UP, perfect, yes. Online, thank you. Just give a like if you are enjoying the class. Hope it is clear, boss. Now it is the next, the major one. Consider the following statement regarding Sangai festival in Manipur. The festival is named after the endangered, we call it as Sangai deer, found only in, we call it as Kebul Lamjung National Park. I said it is endemic. Yes, it's not critically endangered, be cautious. Now it's an annual festival started in 2010 and showcases Manipuri culture including Ras Leela, including martial art called as Tangta. Yes, the theme of the 2025, it is where blossom meets prosperity. Not this theme, it is where blossoms the meets the prosperity or peace. That's the theme here. That is the theme here. Third one is incorrect. Which is correct? 1 and 2 is correct. Done. Where blossoms breathe harmony, blossoms breathe peace. Where blossoms, it is meets prosperity or the peace part. It is major they are talking about. It is harmony among the different tribal groups. It is since last 2 to 3 years there is a conflict which is happening between the Kukis and Metis. The majority are the Metis and we call it as the minorities are, we call it as the Kukis and Nagas. Now this majoritarian Metis are imposing their own culture on the Nagas people and they resisted against it is the Metis. And that led to conflict between, we call it as the majoritarian people called as Metis and the minority people called as Nagas and Kukis. And it is this year's theme here is, it is where blossom, it is meets harmony or the peace or prosperity is the theme of this, the Sangai festival 2025. Yes or no? Yes, this is about, we call it as Sangai festival. Next one, one nation, one election. One nation, one election. Why this was in news? Why this was in news? Now recently, the 23rd Law Commission, the 23rd Law Commission has clarified saying that one nation, one election, has clarified saying that it is one nation, one election. What do you mean by one nation, one election? It is nothing but simultaneous elections, conducting of elections simultaneously to all the different branches. It is Lok Sabha, state elections, one go. That we call it as what? That we call it as one nation, one election. Now second one, now which committee has recommended saying that one nation, one election should be implemented in India? It is I-Panel committee chaired by, we call it as former President of India. We call it as the Ram Nath Kovind. Before to Draupadi Murmu, it is the President was Ram Nath Kovind. Now he has recommended saying that in India we need to go for, it is one nation, one election or simultaneous elections. Now why we need to go for simultaneous elections? Because it reduces cost, it reduces time, it reduces, it is voting percentage also. At the same time, if we go for one nation, one election, automatically there are a number of challenges also. It leads to, we call it as lesser voice to the state, it is parties. Lesser voice to state parties and lesser accountability of the politicians also. Because the politicians will be visiting the constituencies once in 5 years. This reduces the accountability also. And by keeping all this in the view, it is the Law Commission also said that it is one nation, one election should be implemented in India. Should be implemented in India. This week, Law Commission also said that implement one nation, one election, no worries. Second one, they have also clarified saying that, this does not violate the voter rights also. This does not violate which one? Voters' right. Voters' right. And the third one which has been clarified by Law Commission, we call it as, do we require ratification from the state legislature? No, boss. The Law Commission has clarified. Initially the government were ready to get the ratification. But Law Commission has said that no need to get the ratification from half of the states because it does not violate Article 368 subclause 2. It does not violate article, which article? 368 subclause 2. And also it does not violate it is federalism also, the relationship between center and the states also. Exactly. It also does not violate the federalism, or it does not violate the Article 368 subclause 2. What is Article 368 subclause 2 talk about? Amending power of it is Constitution. Amending power of the Constitution, which has been mentioned under Article 368 subclause 2. Talks about ratification getting from the states. Ratification getting from states. Now if I want to get a ratification, what percentage ratification I need to get? With what majority? It is, I need to get that is simple majority. From how many states? 50% of the states. Be cautious, it is not special majority, it is simple majority. It is simple majority. Yes, online, yes, perfect, yes. Done. This is about our first one. Second, we'll see all those things one by one. First one we call it as simultaneous elections. It is also called as what? One nation, one elections. Yes or no? First, now the simultaneous elections or one nation, one election. What is it? What is this about? First, what is one nation, one election, or what do you mean by simultaneous elections? Now, simultaneous elections or one nation, one election means conducting of, we call it as Lok Sabha election, and we call it as legislative assembly elections at one go. It is conducting the lower houses elections at one go. And after this, in the next 100 days, we need to conduct local self-government elections, which include which one? Panchayat and municipality elections in second phase. And this we call it as what? This we call it as simultaneous elections, or we call it as one nation, one election. Yes or no? Second, now this one nation, one election now recently has been recommended by high level committee chaired by whom? It is former President of India. We call it as Kovind. Headed by Ram Nath Kovind. Second, the third one we call it as the third major important one we call it as, sir, what is the origin of simultaneous elections? Have we took any simultaneous elections in our independent India? It is up till when? It is exactly. Now origin, now we conducted simultaneous elections in our post-independent India for 4 times. Now, which all years? Now one in the year 1952, 1957, it is 1957, and third one 1962, and we call it as 1967. In this 4 elections, we went for what? We went for simultaneous elections. But unfortunately, because of emergency in Kerala, because of dissolutions in a number of houses, we stopped the simultaneous elections and we moved towards what? We moved towards individual or grouping up of the states and going for elections. Hope you're getting it. Now, again we are planning to go back for the simultaneous elections. Why simultaneous elections is needed it is as of now? Because it reduces cost. It reduces cost, it reduces time, it reduces the voting percentage also, because it is the people who will vote at one go. Rather than voting separately for local self-government, self-government, legislative assemblies, ML election, MP elections, voting separately, they'll elect or they'll go for voting at one go. Automatically, voting percentage, time consumption and a cost will also get saved. But unfortunately, it also has a number of challenges also. What are the number of challenges? What are the number of challenges? It is national governments will prevail rather than state governments. People will vote for one party rather than voting separately for state and nation. That will hamper. Second one, it is MLAs and MPs will come to the constituencies once in some 5 years. And that reduces what? Accountability. That reduces accountability. That reduces accountability. And this we call it as exactly this. This we call it as the one nation, one elections is all about. Is all about. Now, if I want to introduce one nation, one election again, or simultaneous elections again from 2028, what are the things I need to do now? What are the things I need to do now? I need to amend the constitution and I need to pass it as two bills. And I need to pass two bills. One is for this bill and second is for this bill. Yes or no? It is I need to bring in an amendment. I need to bring in an amendment under Article 368. Under Article 368. Now where will I bring a bill? It is constitutional amendment bill. It is only brought in only in Parliament, not in Lok Sabha, only in Parliament. Yes or no? It is for this one, do I require ratification from the states? No. For first bill, no ratification is required because it is the authority of whom? It's the authority of central government to conduct elections to Lok Sabha and the lower houses. No ratification is required. Be cautious. No ratification to the states with simple majority and that too from 50% of the states is not required. Not required, boss. Second one, now to conduct it is simultaneous elections to the local self-government because it is the authority of the state government. It is the authority of the State Election Commission. If that is the case, don't you think it requires ratification? This has been passed as second bill. It requires ratification. But unfortunately, Law Commission has said that it is not required. Initially government had said that ratification is required, but Law Commission has clarified saying that it does not violate which one? Article 368 subclause 2. And that is the reason ratification from 50% of the states with simple majority is not required. Because it is not violating which one? Article 368 subclause 2. Hope you're getting it. I am not curbing any of the election rights. Rather, I am saying it to the different state governments saying that conduct the elections at one go. It does not violate anything. No ratification is required. Nothing but we need to pass it as two bills. One bill we call it as, it is making simultaneous elections for Legislative Assembly and Lok Sabha lower house. And this, it has been passed as we call it as second bill, and for that initially we thought that we want ratification. But Law Commission, the expert law body has clearly said that no ratification is required and it does not violate Article 368 subclause 2 also. And that's the game here now. Now, it is, if the Parliament passes it, it is no state approval is required now. And that is the challenge and that is the risk for the states also. Second one. Third one we call it as about Law Commission. The third one about Law Commission of India. Yes, exactly. Article 82 and 171 has clarified that also. I'll explain that also. It is majorly about Delimitation Commission. Yes. Now next one we call it as Law Commission. Now what do you mean by Law Commission? What do you mean by Law Commission? It is first one we call it as Law Commission. Law Commission. Now what type of body is this? Law Commission. Law Commission is a executive body, or it is also called as which body? Government body, which was not being established. It is by an act. Neither it is established under the Constitution nor established by an act of Parliament. That is the reason it's a executive body. Executive body, and established under which ministry? Ministry of Law and Justice. Established under, we call it as Ministry of Law and Justice. Ministry of Law and Justice. Second. Third one, what is the origin of Law Commission? What is the origin of Law Commission? Who was it is first Law Commissioner? Lord Macaulay. Now the origin dates back to, we call it as 1833 via a charter called as Charter Act of 1833. Via the charter called as 1833 Charter Acts. Via the charter we call it as which charter? Charter Act of, we call it as 1833, and came into effect next year. That we call it as what? 1834. Now who was the first Law Commissioner? Now Law Commissioner we call it as Lord Macaulay. We call it as Lord Macaulay was the first, we call it as Law Commissioner of India. It is, we call it as Lord, we call it as Macaulay. Lord Macaulay is considered to be the first, we call it as the Law Commissioner with respect to India. Yes. Now who was the first? It is Law Commissioner after independence. MC Settle Ward, which has been established in which year? In the year 1955. In the year 1955, and that we call it as MC Settle Ward. MC Settle Ward. Be cautious. Now what is the role of this? We call it as Law Commission. What is the law? It is the role of Law Commission. What is, we call it as, what is the objective? It is recommending it to the government regarding law. It is what need to be changed, what need to be amended, what need to be brought to the Constitution and to the different laws. Now who will advise? Now expert advice. Expert advice related to what? Related to law. It is advised by whom? Advised by, we call it as majorly, advised by Law Commissioner. Now whatever it has been advised, is it mandatory for the government to accept that? No, boss. Because it's a government body, it's an executive body. If it is an executive or government body, it is, the recommendation is only advice. It is not binding on the government. It's not binding on the government. It is not binding on the government. Only we call it as advice. Yes. Now, what is the tenure of this Law Commission? It is, normally it has been established for 3 years, can be extended for n number of years because it's a government body. It can be extended for any number of years, but normal tenure will be 3 years. Normal tenure will be, we call it as 3 years. Done? I hope it is clear. We have talked about simultaneous elections, some factuals. We have also talked about majorly with respect to, we call it as law commission also. Done? Solve the question now. Done? Okay. Are you done with this? Now consider the following statement regarding, we call it as the proposed framework of simultaneous elections in India. The Union Law Ministry stated that it is one nation, one election bills do not violate the constitutional basic structure. Obviously it does not violate the basic structure, and I have also clarified saying that it does not violate the voter rights also, it does not violate Article 368 subclause 2 also, and it does not violate the basic structure as stated by, we call it as Keshwananda Bharati judgment in the year 1973. 24th April of, we call it which one? 24th April 1973, which talks about which one? KBC case. Kaun bane Crorepati case? It is Keshwananda Bharati case. Done? First one done. And it only affects the voters' right. I also said that it does not violate which one? The voters' right, because it is, though you might be voting at different times, you will be voting at one go. How will it violate your right? It does not violate your right also. Second one, it is Article 83 subclause 2 and Article 172 subclause 1. Majorly talks about delimitation. Allows Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies to be dissolved before completing 5 years. Can I do it? Can I do it? Yes, I can do it. Now who has authority? Head of the state has the authority. The president at the, it is the national level, and at the state level governor has the authority to dissolve both the houses before completing 5 years. Yes or no, boss? It is head of the states has authority. Head of the states. At central level it is President of India. At state level we call it as Governor of the state. As the authority which supports the possibility of aligning election cycle. Yes. It is, second one is incorrect and first one is what? Incorrect. Now they are asking which of the following is are correct and which one is only correct? It is only 2 is correct. Be cautious. Second one, they have asked the question in UPSC 2025 also about PDS. Prorogation, dissolution and summoning. Who has authority? President has authority at central level. At state level who has authority? Governor has the authority. Every year about the president and about the governor, they are asking a number of questions also. At least one will be there for sure. Yes, done. This is about, we call it as, this is about the major one called as simultaneous elections. See, other than this, not even a single question will be in your exam, but for sure, it is on simultaneous elections, there will be a question. There will be a question for sure. Yes, highly important one. Now, if you want, it is next one getting called as delimitation commission. We'll discuss that also at max last. Now, what is delimitation commission? What is the role of delimitation commission? It is readjustment of boundaries. Now, creation of constituencies. It is created by whom? Delimitation commission. Now, what type of body is this delimitation commission? Is it a constitutional body, or is it a statutory body established by Act of Parliament, or it is a executive body? It is delimitation commission. It's not a constitutional body, rather it has been created by an Act of Parliament and state legislatures. If that is the case, what type of body is that? It is statutory body. Be cautious. Be cautious, though you might get confused with respect to this. Now 80, it is 82 or 81 and 171 talks about the power which has been given to Parliament. The power which has been given to the Parliament to establish what? To establish Delimitation Commission. Highly important one. No matter what, Delimitation Commission is a statutory body which has been created by an act of Parliament. Which has been created by an act of Parliament. Done? Is that the case? It is, we call it as statutory body. How many Delimitation Commission has been created as of now by the Parliament? It is 4. It is Delimitation Commission has been created, and this has been freezed up till which year? Up till next year. Up till next year. Under 84th Constitutional Amendment Act, which has been freezed up till 2026. Freezed. And after 2026, we'll be having a new Delimitation Commission. Third one. What is the role of this Delimitation Commission? It is the complete aspects related to constituency. The complete aspects related to constituency. It is majorly related to readjusting the boundary, modifying the boundary, declaring a constituency. All these things have been done by what? Delimitation Commission. Delimitation Commission. Yes. Fourth one. What's the composition of, we call it as Delimitation Commission? Now 3 members. Now this includes 3 members. Which all? Now one we call it as CJI or Supreme Court Judge. It is CJI or Supreme Court Judge. Second one we call it as Chief Election Commissioner or members or election commissioners. Chief Election Commission and State Election Commissioner, or we call it as Election Commissioners. Dedicated Election Commissioners. If it is Maharashtra Election Commissioner. If it is UP Election Commissioner. If it is Assam Election Commissioner. These 3 members. Now whatever the report which is being provided, it is final and binding. Whatever the report which is being provided, it is final and which is binding. Final and binding, but according to last year's Supreme Court judgment, if it is illegal, the Supreme Court has the authority to change it. Only if it is illegal, only if it is injustice, only if it is not fair, then only we can go for. It is changing of the, it is, we call it a report also, but in majority of the cases, it is final and what? Binding. In majority of the cases, it is final and binding, but according to recent Supreme Court judgment, it has said that if the report is illegal, if the report is injustice, if the report is discriminatory, if the report is unfair, they can go for judicial review. They can go for judicial review and they can modify that also. Is it good or bad? Good, boss. Yes, final and binding does not mean that they are outside the constitution. They are within the purview of, we call it as judicial review. Judicial review is a basic structure of our constitution. Judicial review is what? Basic structure of our constitution. Yes. Done. Recent judgment is the mandatory. Done. I hope it is clear now. Yes or no? Yes. The next one we call it as ginger capital of India. What is ginger capital? What do you mean ginger? What do you mean by ginger? Now my simple question is, which state is the largest producer of, we call it as, the ginger? Rachana, it is only I am here, no technical team is here. It is some or the other way, some 30 minutes. Okay, next class I will inform that. Now the first one, what is ginger? At least what is ginger? It is majorly, we call it as a tuberous root, which is majorly used as, we call it as different culinary product. It is used in, we call it as the medicines, Ayurvedic medicines majorly, which is used in, we call it as the perfumes, which is used to prepare, we call it as allopathic medicines also. It is useful as an antioxidant, as an anti-allergy. It is used as an, we call it as, it is immunity booster also. It has n number of benefits. Now the simple thing is, Niti Aayog has recommended now to make which state as we call it as, to recommend which state to make it as we call it as, it is ginger capital of India. It is Mizoram. But fortunately or unfortunately, Madhya Pradesh is the largest producer of, we call it as, the ginger. Madhya Pradesh is the largest producer of, it is ginger. And which city is called as the ginger city of India? Which city is called as ginger city of India? Highest producer is we call it Madhya Pradesh, no worries. And recent Niti Aayog has recommended it as, it is ginger capital of India, no worries. Mizoram. But my simple question is, which city is called as ginger city of India? It is that we call it as, it is the Chhindwara district of Madhya Pradesh. It is majorly we call it as, it is majorly the Chhindwara, the district of Madhya Pradesh has been declared as we call it as ginger city of India. Yes. Now in this topic we will talk about Mizoram, we will talk about Niti Aayog, we will talk about ginger, we will talk about the exportness of ginger, we will talk about some basics or factuals also. Yes, some 4 to 5 the topics we will be discussing as a part of each and every the subtopics. Done. Now first one we call it as, why this was in news. Why this was in news? First one, the Niti Aayog has recommended Mizoram as what? The Mizoram as we call it as, the ginger capital of India. They are planning to develop this Mizoram as what? It is ginger capital. So my simple question is, if Madhya Pradesh is the largest producer of ginger, why this Niti Aayog is recommending Mizoram as a ginger capital? Don't you think it is discriminatory? The reason is, the Mizoram's, the flagship, the crop is ginger. Flagship crop is nothing but, they grow across the year only ginger. Majorly ginger. It is Mizoram's flagship crop. Now in Madhya Pradesh, though it is the largest producer, they grow it as an alternative crop. They grow it as a subsidiary crop. But this Mizoram people grow it as what? Grow it as, we call it as flagship. What do you mean by flagship species means? The most important, the crop. Flagship crop of Mizoram. First one done. Second. Now second one about ginger. Now it is a majorly we call it as, it is what type of crop is this? Now it is the tuberous crop. What do you mean by tuberous means? Modified root. Modified root we call it as, the major one we call it as that tuberous one. Tuberous crop which grows in soil or which grows in soil. Tuberous, ginger. Yes or no? Okay, alva. Ginger garlic paste, shunti, all the things comes under major, we call it ginger. First one. Second one, it is the soil grown crops. Second one. What is the temperature which is required? Temperature which is required here is, now in and around some 20 degrees to we call it as, some 28 degrees. The moderate temperature which is required for the growth of this we call it as the ginger. And the third one we call it as, what is the advantages we have with respect to we call it as ginger? Now it is used as antioxidants. It is used as immunity booster. It is used as anti-allergy. It is also used as, it is Ayurvedic medicines also. It is used in Ayurvedic medicine also. Yes or no? Yes. Now along with the things, now which state is the largest producer of, we call it as ginger? Madhya Pradesh is the largest producer. Majority of the ginger which is exported abroad. Majority of the ginger which is grown in Madhya Pradesh or in India, which is exported, and that we call it as export crop. That we call it as export crop. In and around we call it as, in and around 3 million tons has been exported. In and around it is the 3 million tons has been exported from India. In and around the 3 million, or we call it as, to be precise if you want, it is 2.4 million metric tons is being exported from India to abroad. First, largest producer was Madhya Pradesh. Now which state largest producer was spices? Madhya Pradesh. Second one, now which city is called as, it is ginger capital of India. It is the Chhindwara. It is the Chhindwara district. It is considered to be the, it is ginger capital, or I can say ginger city of India. Ginger city of India. Third one. Now which one recently recommended by Niti Aayog as, we call it as the ginger capital? It is, we call it as Mizoram. Why? Because of its, we call it as flagship crop. Flagship crop called as, it is the ginger. Yes, this is about, majorly about, we call it as the concept of ginger. Next little bit about Niti Aayog. Niti, what do you mean by Niti means? National Institute of Transforming India. National Institute of Transforming India. When it has been established? It has established on 1st January 2015 by replacing erstwhile Planning Commission. By replacing, it is Planning a Commission. Done. Niti means National Institute of Transforming India. NDA question. National Institute of Transforming India. Now what is the role of this Niti? It's not policy making, they act as a think tank. They act as think tank. Now think tank means they provide ideas. They provide ideas. They provide ideas to both the government, center and the states also. They provide it to center and the states. Done. Next one. Now, what is the composition? Composition: chairman, vice chairman, secretary, members. Now, who is the chairman of Niti Aayog? Chairman is Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Second one, vice chairman Suman Berry. Third one, secretary BVR Subramanian. BVR Subramanian. What are the members? The chief ministers of the states. The chief minister of the states. CMs represents as a part of the members. Yes, exactly, yes. Now, the next one we call it as, what is the approach? It has been inculcated. We call it as bottom-up approach. Bottom-up approach or a decentralized approach. Niti Aayog does not have financial allocation. They does not have financial allocation. Whereas Planning Commission had allocation of finances. But now this finances is being handled by which ministry? Ministry of Finance, Nirmala Sitharaman will allocate the finances. And their main objective is to achieve cooperative federalism, and we call it as sustainable development, SDG goals. Their objective is dual objectives, twin objectives. One is cooperative federalism, second is achieving sustainable development goals. This is about, we call it as complete aspect about Niti Aayog, and I've also discussed already about the reports also. I have discussed about the composition, everything I've discussed already in the current affairs itself. Done. The next one about the Mizoram. Now about Mizoram. Now where is Mizoram? What is the location of Mizoram? Mizoram we call it as northeastern state location. Second one, which is the only state which borders with the Myanmar and Bangladesh also? Mizoram. This is the only state. This is the only state which borders with the most important, we call it as Myanmar, as well as which one? Bangladesh also. Bangladesh also. Yes. The third one, now this Mizoram has Blue Mountains. Now this Mizoram is called as the Blue Mountains. Why it is called as Blue Mountains? Why it is called as Blue Mountains? Because it is made up of what? It is made up of, we call it as the flowers and the rocks. Rocks which are blue in color, which is making it blue. The Blue Mountains. The Blue Mountains, that you should be aware. Yes, it's also called as Lushai Mountains. Lushai Hills. The fourth one under SDG, Northeast India Index, which state has been ranked at the top? Mizoram. Mizoram has been ranked at the top, exactly on an yes. Mizoram has been ranked at the top. And next one it borders with, we call it as Rakhine State. It borders with Rakhine State of Myanmar, where Rohingya population are present. Where Rohingya population was present. Mizoram. Next one. Now with respect to, it is under, we call it as ULAS. Under ULAS, New India Literacy Program. Under New India Literacy Program, which is the first state to be declared as literate state? Mizoram. And next one, when was Mizoram created? 1987, Mizoram has been created. It comes under 6th scheduled states. It comes under 6th schedule state. And the next one, the next major important, the one. Now which is the border it is, or the border between, we call it as the Mizoram and we call it as the Myanmar. It is bordered by, we call it as Assam Rifles. Assam Rifles, and along with the things, it comes under Inner Line Permit. Mizoram comes under Kaladan Multimodal Project. Kaladan Multimodal Project to the northeast. Yes. Kaladan Multimodal Project, Neela Kurinji, exactly, yes, northeast. At least you should know about all this, the things here. Okay, now, this we call it Enapa. Now, Mizoram related one, and we have talked about ginger, we have talked about, we call it as, it is the Mizo Hills or Lushai Hills or the Blue Mountains. We have discussed about A to Z. Done? Now solve this. Done? Okay, only one? Okay. Now with respect to it is consider following statement regarding the ginger production in India. Now Mizoram is currently the largest ginger producing state in India and is officially recognized as which one? Now Mizoram is not the largest and is officially, it has not been recognized as ginger capital, rather Niti Aayog has recommended, not officially recognized also. First one anyways it is incorrect. Second one, the Chhindwara district in Madhya Pradesh is known as Ginger, the city of India. This is correct and they are asking which one is incorrect. Now which is incorrect? Only one is incorrect. Done? I hope there is no doubts. Next one. It is majorly we call it as, it is scheme to promote, we call it as the sintered rare earth we call it as permanent magnets. Sintered rare earth permanent magnet. This year expect a question on this. Now what do you mean by sintered? What do you mean by sintered? What do you mean by rare minerals, rare earth? Why we want rare earth minerals? Just for logic. Why we want rare earth minerals? Why we want? First one, okay. What does this rare earth minerals means? Is it rare in minerals? Or is it extraction is difficult? It is rare earth minerals means it is not rare in earth. Rather what? Rather extraction is what? Extraction is what? Difficult. Yes or no? First one. Second one. Now why we want this rare earth minerals? Why we want this rare earth minerals? Because rare earth minerals are considered to be it is inputs which are required in, we call it as advanced industries. Rare earth minerals are considered to be what? Raw minerals. Raw minerals in which all industries? In which all industries? Advanced industries. Now which is that advanced industries? Which require rare earth minerals? Majorly manufacturing of EV vehicles which require lithium. Second one, in industry called as, it is majorly, first one is EV vehicles, second one we call it as semiconductors. Second one, semiconductors. Third one, where are we using? Space technology. Space technologies, defense technologies, space, defense. After that, computer, mobiles, a number of things. Second, but unfortunately, India is producing only 1% of rare earth minerals. 1% is only produced in where? Only produced in, we call it as India. Though we are the 5th largest reserve holders. Though India is what? India is, we call it as the 5th largest reserve holder, but manufacturing only what? But producing only 1%. If that's the case, which country is the largest reserve holder and which country is the largest producer of rare earth minerals? China. Now China produces more than 70% of the rare earth minerals. Rare earth minerals. Yes or no? It is who produces highest amount? It is China. China produces more than, we call it as 70% of, we call it as rare earth minerals. Don't you think India is dependent on, we call it as China for our production? Semiconductors, it is solar panels, wind turbines, defense, computers, electronics, manufacturing, A to Z. But if that is the case, can we become self-reliant without this rare earth minerals? Can we become self-reliant? It is no, boss. Now, if I want to become self-reliant, how can I become self-reliant with respect to, we call it as rare earth minerals? How can I become self-reliant? It is, I can become self-reliant by extracting these rare earth minerals for usage of what? Different inputs. Now for that, we have launched a scheme called as, which scheme is that? It is the sintered rare earth permanent magnet. The rare earth permanent magnet has been launched. Hope you're getting it. It is a scheme called as rare earth permanent magnet has been established. Now this has been launched by which ministry? Ministry of Mines. Launched by Ministry of Mines, supported by we call it as Department of Atomic Energy, supported by nodal ministries, Ministry of Mines. Nodal ministries, Ministry of Mines, supported by, it is overseen by Department of Atomic Energy, comes under which ministry or which minister? Prime Minister. And we call it as Niti Ayog. Again, Niti Ayog is also controlled by, chaired by Prime Minister. Yes, it is overseen by these two things. Department of Atomic Energy and we call it as Niti Ayog. But nodal ministry, Ministry of Mines. Done. Second, which has been launched in which year? 26 November 2025. 2025 first one. Second one, sir, my simple question is, ministry fine, launch is fine. Now for how many years this scheme is being launched? Now this scheme is being launched for 7 years. This scheme is being launched for 7 years. That 2 years for constructing of infrastructure. The 2 years for construction of infrastructure and 5 years will be implementing the scheme. 5 years will be for implementing the scheme. First one done. Second, how many cost? What is the outlay? Now outlay we call it as 7,280 and out of that around 6,500 crore is being given as an incentive. One who extracts, it is, we will be providing as what? Incentive bonus. 6,500 crores will be provided as an incentive or bonus. Rest around 700 crores will be used for construction of infrastructure in the next 2 years. Hope you're getting it. 2 years for infrastructure and 5 years is for extraction, or we call it as, it is extraction of rare earth minerals. And during that time, we'll be providing, we call it as incentive of around 6,500 crores when we extract rare earth minerals. Rare earth minerals. And the third one, sir, what is the features of this? What are features of this? Now this is considered to be we call it as first of its kind. First of its kind. Now this year for sure there will be question on this. For sure there will be question. This is the first of its initiative to make India with respect to what? Self-reliant with respect to, we call it as rare earth minerals. To be precise, we call it as permanent magnets. Permanent magnets. Yes or no? Now sir, my simple question is, what is this siderite rare earth permanent magnet means? What does this siderite rare earth permanent magnet means? Now it's an alloy. What do you mean by alloy? It's a mix of more than one. Now it is, we are mixing. It's an alloy. It's an alloy. Alloy means it's been mixed. Now we are mixing 3 important, we call it as rare earth minerals. Now that rare earth minerals which includes iron, rare earth minerals which includes boron, it's not bronze. If I mix iron with bronze, it will be zinc. It is iron, boron. Iron is a rare earth mineral, boron is a rare earth mineral, and along with the zinc, highest rare earth mineral we call it as neodymium. It is neodymium. It is neodymium has been mixed. Iron, boron and neodymium, it has been mixed. Now a simple question is, sir, why are we making all this circus? Don't you think can we use boron and neodymium or iron separately? Why we want to mix? Extraction itself is difficult. And you are saying that after extraction mix it. But this is considered to be the rarest rare mineral. If I mix all those things as an alloy, this is considered to be the rarest of rare mineral in the complete universe. It is non-replaceable and no alternative at all. And that's the reason we are going for rare earth permanent magnet. Rare earth permanent magnet. Why are we making all this jugalbandis or why all this circuses? Because it is considered to be what? It is considered to withstand high, we call it as resistant or high temperature. It can withstand what? High temperature, boss. Now if it can withstand high temperature, don't you think I can use it for different missions? The Venus mission, the solar mission, use it in the MOM mission, all those things. That's the major reason. The reason of we call it as the launching of, we call it as which one? The launching of, we call it as, it is this rare earth mineral mission or permanent mission. The mission. We can also use it in where? Electric vehicles, EVs, which will not catch fire also. I can use it in bulletproof jackets, defense. I can resist the bullets. Hope you're getting it. That's the reason we want to mix it. Second one we call it as, there is no alternative other than this. There is no alternative other than this in our complete the world. And that's the reason we have launched a mission, first of its kind, by Ministry of the Mines, supported by Department of Atomic Energy, and Niti Aayog. For a period of 7 years, now 2 years for building of infrastructure and 5 years is for extraction, and will be providing an incentive of in and around 6,500 crore rupees. And fourth one we call it as, we are going for extraction, or we call it as, it is majorly the rare earth permanent magnets, or we call it as, it is a high temperature resistance, it is, or there is no alternative at all. Now which we can use it in different, we call it as advanced sectors, starting from EVs, computer, electronics, mobile phones, all those things. All the things we can use this, and that we call it as siderite rare earth permanent magnets. It's a rare earth minerals. We are trying to mix it. And this we call it as the rare earth permanent the magnets. Yes or no? Now on the same lines, we also have the second mission. We call it as the National Critical Mineral Mission. It is the major mission, we call it as National Critical Mission. On the same lines of this ministry, we have a scheme called as, which scheme is that? National Critical Mission. Now which has been launched by which ministry? The same Ministry of Mines. But be cautious. Now in this scheme, we are not going for extraction of rare earth minerals. We are going for extraction of rare earth minerals, and we want to merge this. And that we call it as what? The siderite rare earth, the permanent magnet. But under that we are talking about extraction of rare earth minerals. Hope you're getting it. Now this has been launched by Ministry of Mines. Launched in which year? It is first one announced in, we call it as announced in last year, launched in this year. Announced in, we call it as 2024, but launched on March 2025. Launched in the year 2025. Now we are talking about now how many critical minerals we need to extract. It is 30 critical minerals we are targeting here. 30 critical minerals we are targeting. We are targeting what? It is the 30 critical minerals. Critical minerals means strategic minerals. Critical minerals means strategic minerals we are targeting. We are targeting here. Exactly, yes. Exactly, perfect, yes. I hope you are getting it. Yes, 2024, it is announced as a part of our budget, and 2025 we have launched this on March 2025, targeting 30 critical mineral mission by Ministry of the same mission, the same ministry itself. Done. Highly important. Be cautious. They won't ask this. Already they have asked the question in mains, UPSC mains. UPSC mains 2025 question, and expect a question this year. Keli kottilla andre keli nanu. For sure there will be question. Done? What is the answer for this? What is the answer? Now do you want some more time? Or is it done? Okay. Now consider the following statement regarding the scheme to promote, we call it as manufacturing of the sintered, the rare earth permanent magnets in India. The scheme aimed to establish, we call it as the 6,000, it is MTPA of integrated, the rare earth, we call it as permanent manufacturing capacity, which will be distributed among the 5 beneficiaries selected through competitive bidding. We'll see this. Second one, sintered rare earth minerals are high performance magnets made by compacting the rare earth mineral alloy powders and freezing them to produce dense magnetic materials, or by heating. It is, if I want to mix the different alloys, with freezing I cannot do it, boss. I need to heat it and automatically all these things will melt. Common sense question. Think about gold. If I freeze that, I cannot mix. If it is heated, automatically it will freeze, or I can say it will mix, alloy. If 2 is wrong, automatically you will get an answer. We'll see that. It is 2 must be there. The scheme will be implemented over a period of 5 years or 7 years. 7 years. The answer is 2 and 3, 1 is correct. Now when there is a question and the options are lengthier, automatically during such period of times, such options will be right. 99 to 100% when the options are lengthier, without any factuals, automatically it will be option is right. Now in this case, it is all the 3 cannot be wrong, 1 at least must be right, at least to some extent. Now 2 and 3 is incorrect, and the answer is 2 and 3. Done? Answer is 2 and 3. The last topic for the day, we call it as now highly gubby volcano. Highly gubby volcano. Now why this highly gubby volcano was in news? Why this highly gubby was in news? Now this has been extracted, or can say this has been, it is ejected after how many years? Now 12,000 years. After 12,000 years, why this was in news? Why this was in news? Why this was in news? Now recently, Aili Gubbi volcano has been erupted in which country? It is Ethiopia. To the northeast of, we call it as Addis Ababa. We call it as northeast of, we call it as Addis Ababa. On the border between which two country? On the border between, we call it as Ethiopia and we call it as, it is Eritrea. Yes, Ethiopia and Eritrea. We'll see that one by one. First one we call it as, it is Hayale Gubbi or Aili Gubbi. First one. Now first one here is, why this was in news? Why this was in news? Now this Aili Gubbi has been erupted after how many thousand years? After 12,000 years. After 12,000 years. What does this Aili Gubbi means? Aili Gubbi means what? Aili Gubbi means it's a volcano. It's a volcano. What type of volcano? It's a shield volcano. It's a shield volcano, and up till now it was dormant. What do you mean by shield? It's like a shield. It's like a shield. Yes or no? And second one, it was in dormant stage. It was in dormant stage, but suddenly what happened? Boom. Eruption. And now it is what? Active. It was dormant up till now, but now it has become active. Now it has become what? It is active. It has now become, we call it as active. Be cautious. It's a shield volcano now which has erupted. Which has erupted in which country? Erupted in, we call it as Ethiopia. Ethiopia. On the border between Ethiopia and we call it as Eritrea. Done? Ethiopia and Eritrea. My question is, why in Ethiopia and Eritrea? Why not other places? Because it comes under a part of Afar Triangle. It comes under a part called as Afar Triangle, or it comes under a part called as East African Rift Valley. It comes under a part called as which one? Which comes under a part. Now, yav part of antandre? We call it as East African Rift Valley. Now, when is Rift Valleys are formed? When two plates are moving away from each other, boss. Converge in other fold mountains agatte. If it is moving away from each other, it is fault region is being created. When it is fault, it is boom, volcanoes. The magma comes out from the asthenosphere and solidifies, and that solidification we call it as volcano. Hope you're getting it? Yes. Now, which is that plates which are moving, sir? Which is that plates which are moving? Now understand this. This is asthenosphere. Now this we call it as asthenosphere. Now in this asthenosphere we have a material called as the magma. When these two plates are moving away from each other, towards the left we have a major plate called as which plate? African plate. And the second one, the minor plate called as Arabian plate. Now when this happens, there's a creation of fault. Yes or no, boss? And that fault we call it as vent. That fault we call it as what? Vent. Yes or no? It is vent. Now when this comes out and solidifies, that is called as lava. That is called as lava, and it creates a volcano. Lava and volcano, and that is in the form of what shape? Shield volcano. Shield shape. Along with that, it is the different the plumes is also being released. The plume, it is a different gases are also being released. Gases, the smoke, the dust, all the things are being released, and all these things has reached Red Sea, South Asia, including India. Now these gases have reached which region? Have reached Red Sea. As reached, we call it as, it reached, we call it as South Asia, including we call it as India. That is the reason it is majority of the aircrafts in India also, it has been shut down because of changes in weather, because of we call it as invisibility of the climatic conditions. And when the smoke is being entering into the, we call it as atmosphere, it can hamper the engines, it can hamper the sensors, all those things. And that's the reason you might have seen, it is Indigo has cancelled 300 flights because of this. It is, we call it as Hayali, or we call it as the Gubi volcano. Yes, this is about, we call it as the first one. Now second one, now coming to India. Now in India, we also have a volcano. Now which is the volcanoes we have as a part of our, we call it as the volcanic system. Now in India, we have a volcanoes called as Barren volcano and Narcondram, it is island. It comes under which one? Now this is the few volcanoes which comes under, we call it as Indian volcanoes. Now which is present in where? Which is present in, we call it as Andaman and Nicobar. In Andaman and Nicobar, we have a volcano called as, now there is a few volcanoes. One we call it as Barren Island, UPSC 2019 question, Barren Island. Second one we call it as Narcondram Island. All these are present in, we call it as, to the northeast of Andaman. To the northeast of Andaman, it is present on the border between, we call it as Indian plate and we call it as, it is Australian plate. It is present between Indian plate and Australian the plate. When two plates are moving away from each other, automatically it releases a volcano, and that we are seeing even in India also. Even in India also. Yes, done. Next one, little bit information about Ethiopia. Ethiopia, where is Ethiopia? Horn of Africa. It is present as a part of which one? As a part of, we call it as Horn of Africa. It is present as a part of, we call it as which one? Horn of Africa. Horn of Africa, it's a landlocked country. Which is the capital? Addis Ababa. African Union capital is also present in where? Addis Ababa. It is present in, we call it as Addis Ababa. Addis Ababa. Second one. The third one we call it as, now this Addis Ababa, we have a conflicted region, we call it as Tigray region. Conflicted or disputed territory, that we call it as Tigray. Tigray region. Fourth one we call it as COP 32, will be held in where? Addis Ababa. What about COP 33? Planning for India, but not yet officially confirmed. Not yet officially confirmed. 31 is in Turkey or Turkey. Turkey, or it's in Turkey, it is 31. Yes, this is about the major one, we call it as the complete aspects of volcanoes. NRLM, okay, it is majorly, we have discussed. National Rural Livelihood Mission. The first country to implement this is Ethiopia. They NRLM. Deen Dayal Antyodaya National Rural Livelihood Mission has been implemented even in, it is Ethiopia also. Yes. Yeah. Okay, exactly, as banned, it is majorly, it is fuel vehicles and they are replacing it with EV vehicles also. Yes, done. Okay. So this. Done? Which of the following is are incorrect? 1 only, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1, it is 2 and 3. Done at least? Okay. Now consider the following statement regarding the eruptions of it is Ethiopia's Hayali Gubi volcano. Now Hayali Gubi volcano is not a stratovolcano. It is, we call it as shield volcano located in Ethiopia's Afar region and is known for steep-sided. Is it steep-sided? No, gradual. It is shield means it's a gradual one. It is high explosive eruptions. Incorrect. The volcano lies within the tektonically active Afar depression where Africa and Arabia plates are converging. Wrong, it is diverging. Everything is correct except this. Third one, the recent eruption produces an ash flumes up to 45,000 feet. It is drifting across the Red Sea towards West India also. That's correct. And incorrect is what? 1 and 2 are incorrect. Yes or no? Yes. This is all with respect to the major important news from this week. Yes. I hope you guys enjoyed the class. Is there any doubts? Online, offline? Okay. Okay now. Now this is all for today. Thank you. See you all next week. Online, thank you. Yes, online. Hope you guys enjoy the class. Just before leaving, just leave a like. Yes. Yes, yes. Okay, I have a doubt. 2 to 4 classes. How many topics? Obviously, everything is completely different online. Everything is completely different. See, why will I teach the same topics? Okay. Yes, Pradeep, Karna, thank you. Alpha, thank you. Rakesh, yes. Just give a like before leaving. Yes, online, thank you. See you all next week.